Hello all, and welcome to this post-work beer review, which I am going to dub the got something in my eye beer review, and I'm hoping it clears it. So, you know how I usually get like congested and watery from like drinking IPAs? Well, I'm kind of hoping that happens because like I was not able to generate tears to get this out of my eye, and so I was using eye drops and whatever, and I don't know, it seemed like partially successful because it's not as painful anymore, but still feels like there's something in there. Anyways, with that weird little introduction, let's get on to today's review, which is a review as well as a discussion of a brewery. And what is it that we are reviewing? We are reviewing Brew Free or Die Blood Orange IPA from 21st Amendment Brewery. This is a 7.0 ABV beer, and let's go and see here. 70 IBU. So 7.7, yeah. And this is, of course, brewed with blood oranges. Um, so I was at Safeway, and I saw, which is a grocery store near me, and I saw this, on clearance for under $10. So it's a very rare you go and find a sixer of even like the cheapest macro lager for under $10 in Hawaii. Um, and when I saw it, there was three of them left. It sort of jogged my memory that 21st Amendment Brewery had declared bankruptcy 2 weeks beforehand. So they're probably just clearing off all the shelves of what they have in the grocery store, what stock they have. And because part of their bankruptcy plans is they basically stopped brewing already. Uh, and it was very sudden and somewhat unexpected. So this particular sixer that I have here, brew date was about 6/20, so June 20th thereabout. So it's not that old, but yeah. So it kind of came as a surprise because just the week prior to declaring bankruptcy, the company's co-founders had stepped down and said that they had hired a new CEO to, change the direction of the company. And then a week later, they declared bankruptcy. And before getting into the rest of the story, why don't we just go and pour this one out and give it a quick review. Kind of hope this makes my eyes water. My eyes need watering right now. Okay. So, oh yeah, bring it back here a little bit. A slightly hazy. Turn this a little bit here so you can get the light. Right. A slightly hazy, opalescent, well-carbonated yellow-orange with a thick, frothy off-white head. That is redolent of citrus, in particular blood orange, unsurprising. So you get that blood orange, and you also got, hop citrus. Smells fairly juicy. Not too much tropical, not too much, pine needle or dankness. It's pretty much citrus and juice. Underneath that, kind of biscuity malts. Okay, onto the palate now. Decent amount of bitterness up front. The blood orange is subtle up front. Transitions into almost a papery maltiness in the mids. And interestingly, even though I didn't catch it in the aroma, the top note in the midst does have a little bit of hint of pine there. Finish is bitter, but not overly so. So it doesn't leave like that sort of tannic feeling on the mouth over much. All in all, I would say definition of an average IPA. Not offensive to me, but also not blowing me away. But then takes a lot for an IPA to blow me away nowadays. I haven't reviewed this one before. I have had it before. I'm just not in the situation where I could review it. There have been a couple of beers from 21st Amendment Brewery that I have reviewed and I found really good, honestly. Their Winter Warmer, which is I believe is like called Fireside or something like that, as well as Come Hell or High Watermelon, which is a fruited wheat ale. Um, and I really wish that was the one I found remaindered because that one was a pretty good, darn good beer, I'd say. Um, Light, refreshing, decent watermelon flavor to it. Yeah. So what's sad about this is, on the box, and maybe I should show it to you. I don't have to grab it from the refrigerator to show it to you. It says that they're proudly celebrating their 25th anniversary. And what do they do shortly after their 25th anniversary? Is they close down. Now, why did they close down? Even though they seem to be in a state of leadership transition. Well, part of it is um, a large part of backing capital suddenly dropped out. And the reason the backing capital dropped out was explicitly stated to be the contracting state of the craft beer industry in America. So basically, demand is down. Now, 21st Amendment Brewery um, is basically one of those kinds of breweries that are having the most difficulty in this era of contracting breweries, in that it is a regional brewery. So it's large enough and has enough production power to really make a lot of beer. But now it's getting very, very hard to sell that beer. Add to that they are a Bay Area brewery, and in fact their brew pub is very close to stadium in San Francisco. I'm not sure. Well, maybe not San Francisco. I believe they're in San Leandro. I don't know the area all that well, but they're a Bay Area brewery, and of course, Bay Area in regards to like real estate costs as well as the cost of doing business. It's just a whole nother level from the rest of the United States, which is honestly, um, if I may be frank, and I know this has kind of become a point of political contention at this point, which I don't like to do in this channel, but I do just have to kind of say businesses are struggling right now. A lot of businesses are struggling due to supply chain issues and just the cost of doing business is rising. And so, profit margins are shrinking and can either pass that cost on to your consumer, which some breweries are doing, especially the smaller ones who are more able to get away with it. And or you can just have it kind of collapse because you can't really go and push a widely distributed beer too far up in price. Which goes back to kind of discussion that I had with my Calabash cousin, who was an accountant at a craft beer company, about the huge arguments about profit margins. And that leads into the next thing. So even with, like, so they built a new plant that was finished right at the peak of the craft boom, 2015, and then of course things start slowly sliding downhill until, like, which was manageable for a lot of breweries. But then COVID hit, and COVID was, excuse my language, but I can't think of any other better way to put it, a real kick in the nuts to the craft beer industry here in the United States. And so it became, brew pubs, closed. That was, um, you know, part of profitability of, as well as advertising for um, these breweries. And basically, all the disruptions to supply chain, inflation, you know, um, just a general damage to the economy, combined with the contraction of, demand for craft beer within the United States, kind of meant that this brewery was going to be one of the ones that did not make it. Now, I think this is kind of, I'm choosing this one because it's kind of emblematic in certain respects to me. Um, they didn't make bad beer. Their beer was, their quality level was quite a kind of good. You could expect quality beer from their line, with no issues. But by the same token, they were not cutting edge or innovative. But really, when you're a large craft brewer, it's very difficult to kind of have that nimbleness in your production line just because of the volumage, you know? And every single thing can go and cause an issue, even something very weird. So, reading up on this, and I'm not as good as some other craft beer channels, which will bring up the articles and clips and everything. No, no, y'all can look it up yourself, but trust me on this. One of the things that caused a problem, and this is very much a supply and accounting thing, was the fact that they packaged everything in these sort of aluminum cans. You'll see a lot of craft brewers now, they use stickies over, just plain aluminum, but these have like these custom cans, you know. Art's kind of like painted embossed on it. I'm not exactly sure what it is, the process that is used to go and create art on aluminum cans. But the cans, they can't be repurposed to another beer, or, once you made that order, you're sort of stuck with it. Or once you have that supplier and the supplier is not able to supply, you can't suddenly pivot because, um, with the way these cans are made, you're not asking for a blank can, you're asking for a can with art on it. And, you can't suddenly switch to bottles. So there was a sudden, back in 2023, there was a sudden difficulty in the craft beer industry in America in finding cans. Um, and it was particularly bad for those that, their business was mostly done in cans and done in cans in this style, where it's like, this can can't be used for another beer. It's made with the art on it. There's no sticker that's being done placed on by the brewery, after production, which can cause us some more flexibility in production. And part of that is just a volumage. And so when you have part of your line just sitting idle because you literally do not have packaging to put your beer into, well, that's not a good thing profit wise, especially with all the other things going on. And that plant that they got finished in 2015, that big factory, it's like, thing about a factory is, it's not like it's not like, you go to the store and you put cash down on the table. No, this you take loans out to go and build anything nowadays. That's just how capitalism works. You acquire the capital via banks and everything and invest it in your physical facilities. And then you pay it off down the line. And if you can't, well, so sad, too bad. And, you end up with this sort of well-known brewer that is going out of business. And it's not the first one. I mean, Green Flash went out of business. Um, I'm pretty sure any of you watching this can just go and list, all these sort of mid-tier regional breweries that have gone out of business, as well as, local small breweries that have gone out of business. And I can just name a couple in Hawaii right now that are, have declared that they are going out of business or in stasis as they attempt to find a buyer. And so the beer industry contracts in America. So, what can other nations learn from this contraction within the United States, perhaps? Well, I think you need to take anything I say with a grain of salt because, I am not a businessman. I am not an accountant. I am not a craft beer brewer. I do not chase market trends. But it truly seems that looking at all the data at hand, that there was a bit of, what's the term one of the chairmen of the Fed once said? I think it was Alan Greenspan, maybe. Um, Something about unwarranted cheerfulness or something like that. That there was unwarranted optimism within the industry that the boom growth of the early, the late 2000s, early 2010s would continue onward in the future. And that, expanding production would be the best idea. It turned out to be a wrong prediction. Um, but then, you can't really time the market, no matter what it is, whether it's investments or in, production of something. You can't time markets. It's one of the iron laws of economics. And but I think that the greatest cautionary thing is to not go and increase your scope of production too much, particularly when everything is looking good. Um, it seems like all of those physical assets became weights that dragged a lot of brewers down with them. Um, in that, they had these massive factories that could either produce beer that, wasn't going to be sold, try to find something to contract brew in a market that's pretty saturated for that too. And there's an entire discussion about how Gordon Biersch has kind of dominated the contract brewing market in parts of North America right now. And that's a whole another really interesting discussion. I think it's kind of not really looked into. I think people should go and investigate contract brewing in the United States. It's a fascinating thing that, from what little I've looked into, it seems like it's not really discussed enough. But I digress. So basically, don't go and overinvest in physical assets. Because the whims of the market mean that all these physical assets that can be put towards production and distribution kind of really become weights around your neck. And by the very nature of the craft beer industry, you don't need to constantly expand. You can be modest. You can kind of be, you know, super regional in the sense that you only distribute to your surrounding area. And it's really worked for a lot of craft breweries here in Hawaii. There's not really any distribution outside of Hawaii, but that's fine. They've maxed out their production with what they have, and they are able to find buyers for their beer, which is enough. And the flip side of that, and I think I need to say because I think economics is not really understood. If you have like a factory that's only producing at 10% capacity, then your depreciation, your overhead for all that 90% is not being covered by that 10%, which is why when you have a production facility, you want it to be as close to production capacity as possible. Otherwise, it becomes a dead weight. Yeah. Wow. This was um this was interesting. Yeah. Kind of a beer that's not right up my alley, but it's, not repulsive either. And I'd say go and try this, but I don't think you can unless you can find it on clearance yourself. But yeah, I hope you found this discussion somewhat illuminating. Um, you know, it's late after work, and I'm also drinking beer, so yeah. And I have like my eye messed up right now. But yeah. Until next time, folks. Cheers.